Hey everybody, really excited to have you today for my lightning talk on leading data teams with AI, from dashboards to insights. So today I'm looking forward to sharing some tips with you on how I use AI in my day-to-day and how it can actually help us become more of an impactful leader as we go along. So let's get started. Obviously, firstly, who am I? And so I'm a Canadian who doesn't like to live in Canada by the looks of it. So I grew up in Canada and around the age of 12 moved to Australia and did my high school and university there. In my mid 20s, decided to move back to Canada, and about 4.5 years ago, came here to Germany. But I've been in data analytics now for over 18 years across a bunch of different sectors. 7 years ago, and the reason that we're here today is 7 years ago, I had a very transformative coaching experience. And as a result of that, I decided that that would be something that I would be interested in giving back. Now, teaching people what I know and helping people also take that next step in their careers or their journeys. So right now, I'm the VP of Data and Analytics at Zeal Network. I've been there for about 8 months. In the past, I've had a lot of experience in e-commerce, fintech, prop tech, wealth management for a long time, and a little bit of gaming as well. On the side, I'm also an IECL certified executive coach. So my focus is on how do we use coaching to help data leadership grow. And my passion is traveling. There's nothing that I love more than seeing new countries, new cultures, new experiences. And I also, obviously, as a Canadian, I have to coach ice hockey. It's a requirement. So this is who I am. And today, as you can see here, I also take horrible photos. So either it's horrible hair, or it's this weird smile, like I clench my teeth. So, there's a little bit about me. So, why AI now? And I think the thing that we're talking about today is it's no longer something that's optional. The difference, if you're using AI, is whether or not you want to be slow or not. And I think that without AI, what we're seeing today or what we had in the past is we're spending a lot of time doing things that don't necessarily move the needle. We're not responding in the way that people like to be written to or spoken to or communicated with. We're spending a lot of time creating documentation, or in some cases, not even creating documentation at all. And so I think AI now, as well as we'll talk a little bit about today, allows us to be more effective, allows us to do the things that we enjoy doing, which is leading and guiding and influencing, and not so much the things that take our time, which is writing and reviewing and those elements there. So, when AI is done right, it can become a really powerful ally. And so for me today, it's no longer optional. It's very much embedded in the way that I operate. And I encourage you also to do that with yourself. And so you can choose to be the person on the left, looking at those spreadsheets, looking at the code, overly stressed all the time, or we can aspire to be the person on the right, presenting findings, presenting insights, really connecting with the room, making that a positive experience for all. I mean, I know I aspire to be the person on the right. I'm not always there, but it's a great spot to want to be in. And so today, what we'll talk about is how we will use AI in our daily leadership. And so for me, it's not about a replacement for myself. It's really about how do I accelerate. So we'll start off with AI as a sidekick, my executive assistant, my analyst, my partner that helps me take some of the work off my plate. So we'll show a few examples there. I'll then go into AI as a sparring partner. Leadership is lonely. Data leadership is even lonelier sometimes because not many people understand what we do. And part of that is that there's not many people that you can spar with that are within the context of your company. And so how do we use AI to make that happen for us to bounce ideas, spot risk, sharpen our thinking? We'll then talk about AI as a copywriter. Writing is one part of it, but tailoring the message to the audience, tailoring the message to the decision that you want to have is where AI really provides its value. And then finally, all of this only works when we have positive guardrails. All right. And I'll share a little bit about some of the guardrails that I have and some of the things that I share with my team on this one. So let's get started with AI as your sidekick. First and foremost, we need to let AI handle the grunt work. Today, I'm focusing a lot on ChatGPT. There's a little bit of Notebook LM, but all of these apply, whether it's with Copilot or Claude or any of those other elements. They all offer similar features now. And so the goal here is to automate the repetitive tasks, things that you want to maybe review, draft notes, slides, creating the content for slides, etc. The stuff that kind of stalls us. AI for me also removes that blank page problem. We've all been there where we start to think about how do I want to write this? Where do I start? How would I even frame this, right? AI is my sidekick, helps me even just get my thoughts started, my flows going, and then from there it helps me draft that first draft. AI is also one thing that it doesn't replace my judgment. And of course, I've made a spelling mistake, so that's great. But AI doesn't replace my judgment. It would have fixed my spelling mistake. But it does free up many hours on a weekly basis for me to do the higher leverage work, what we talked about, that leading, that guiding, that influencing, that communication, that piece that is the value that you provide, not so much the writing of the emails. So let's go into a couple of examples of things that I do. So the first thing that I do is ChatGPT has a feature. It's called projects. Projects is probably one of the most powerful features that they added in recent times. It's now available also on the free version. You can create a project very easily, and then from there we add files to give it context. So there's within that project, the great thing about a project is that it's a container for all of that information that you give, and you can set it up in a couple of different ways, and we'll show that in a second. But I then provide a lot of examples in terms of add files to give it context. And we'll talk about a context file in a minute, but you can upload things like briefs or strategy docs. Depending on your environment within your company and how flexible they are or willing to share information, you can also upload schemas, dictionaries, meeting notes, transcripts, slide decks, reports, anything. You can even upload some templates for emails or structures in the way that you want to do it. The more you give it in the project files, the more it starts to understand your business. And we'll show an example in a few minutes around that. And so this has been one of the most powerful things. Let's start with that context document. So once I've created my folder, I am very much big on creating a context document. My document lives within a Google Drive. I've created a Google document, and I add as much information as I can about this company. The example that we're leveraging today as we go through is a cat company. It's a made-up company that ChatGPT invented for me. I've now added things to it in my own kind of sense here and added some components to it that it didn't know. Obviously, it's a made-up company. But in my context document, I include who are we as a company? What do we believe in? What are the products that we offer? What's unique about us? How do we work? Do we work in a centralized model, decentralized model, especially as a data leader? Who are the leadership people? Does my CEO like sharp and to the point? Does my CEO like jokes? Does my CEO like cats or dogs? These are all things that I add into this document to provide context so that my ChatGPT project, my container, has as much information as possible about it. Within it, I can also include performance, but how we're doing as key metrics, why our customers love us, anything. My document now, my context document, is around 50 pages, right? So the more that I provide, the more information that I give it, the more that it helps to understand. And if there's conflicting statements in there, it also helps to highlight those as we go through. And so you can kind of tailor it as you go. So the more context you give it, the better it is. And it kind of becomes this little company cheat sheet in a way. So let's have a look at how that plays. So here, what we're doing is we are creating a folder called Company X. This is our made up cat food company that I talked about earlier. So we're creating the project. You'll see here this little wheel is incredibly important. This little wheel lets you select some of the options. You can say, I would like for you to look at all of the information in my ChatGPT, or you can say, I want you to remain within the container of this project. For me, because I have multiple projects for different things, I have one for work, one for my personal life, one for my hockey coaching, one for my business coaching. I have all of these containers. I ask it to keep it separate. I don't want my Zeal container or my hockey container to cross mix because I don't want to have, well, Pierre, you are working with this individual. This is how they like to be spoken to when it's a completely different part of my life, right? So I've keep my containers separate, and that's where you can do this in this optionality. So we create this project. It pops up a little bit on the side. And you'll see here very quickly that within this folder, I can now add files. So here, what we'll do is we'll quickly add in my company X context document, right? And so within a couple seconds, that file will load. When I then go to the next one, now that context file has been loaded, you can see here that there's one file. I am now going to ask a prompt. I wanted to act as an insider to this organization for me. This is again my sidekick. So now you're an insider, you deeply understand our business, you understand our culture, you understand our goals. When I ask a question, I want you to go to the context document as your primary source. If something's not in there, then obviously start to look at logical inferences and always ground your answers in specifics, right? So I think this is the element here where I am now prompting my sidekick to be an insider for the business, to help me be a person or obviously an AI chatbot that is aware of what's happening in the company. So here right away, as I ask this prompt, it's going to spit out information about the company. Right. So now I'm going to act. So who are we? We are a premium food company, right? And all this information. So as you can see here from my context file, it knows who we are, what we sell, how we work. It knows about our culture, our leadership, our performance, our challenges, because I've provided that information in the context file. So right away, it's already much more educated than it would have been otherwise, right? I could ask it, hey, tell me about my company. It'll probably find some information on the internet, but now I've given it insider information. That isn't obviously PII information, but I've given it insider information that allows it to help me make those grounded decisions, right? And so this is going to be the example that we use all the way through. And so you'll see here, like I said, performance, why customers love us, and we go there. Okay. So from here, now we're going to truly use it as a sidekick. So here, the question I'm asking is in our recent analysis, and again, I haven't uploaded anything more than that context file. I notice a downward trend in sales due to an increased product cost. Help me draft a narrative to explain this to my direct manager. I haven't given it context about who my direct manager in this case is, but obviously I would in my file. And now I'm going to send this, and it will do its best attempt to help me draft a narrative. So here, as you can see, it's providing key drivers, customer impact, framing the opportunity, and the next steps. One of the things is in your context file, you can always say that when I ask you a question, always make sure to create a framing the opportunity section, right? And I think that's one of the things as data leaders that we often miss is we often get stuck in the numbers. We often get stuck in the problem that's at hand. And I think what we need to often do is to say, okay, how do I frame this as an opportunity for the business? Again, we are trying to, as data leaders, convince the business, work with the business, support the business in driving towards change. And so here you can often say, hey, I would like for you to tell me the problem, tell me the impact, frame an opportunity for me, and give me 3 or 4 next steps. As a sidekick, this is helpful, right? It allows me to say, okay, this is what I want to do next. And you'll see here that it also provides next steps in terms of would you like to move forward? We'll come back to this example in a few minutes, but it does allow you to be, now I have this partner, the sidekick, that allows me to understand it. Another tool that I like to use is Notebook LM. There are slightly different use cases for this one. Notebook LM, to my understanding of it, and I'm not an expert in any of these tools, but to me right now, if you already have documentation, Notebook LM is a fantastic source because you can upload your own documents and then use them as the foundation of the documentation or that you create. So here in Notebook LM, I uploaded our context document. And right away, it created this chat that provided me with this information about our company. So again, having read the context document, it knows who we are. Where the value comes in with Notebook LM is that these features on the right here, the studio. I can turn my information, my document to a podcast, which cool. I don't know how many people will listen to a podcast about our company, but possibly, right? My current boss is very much an audio person. It can create a video. It can create a mind map, which is really cool. It can also create a quiz, flashcards, or reports, right? So there's a lot of different options depending on what your use case is. And this is especially has been handy if I'm trying to learn a topic. I can upload many, for example, research papers that are all 50 pages long, written by PhDs that I don't understand, but it helps me understand it either through a mind map to put it together or even just a quick summary as a report. So the example that we'll go through here is under the report functionality. So if I click on report, it then gives me a bunch of options for the different types of reports it can create. It can create a blog post for me if I want to create some content on social media. It can create a study guide, a case study, investor pitch, briefing doc, etc. One of the really cool things here is it can also really explain concepts. So as you can imagine, let's use a data term that we're all pretty familiar with is maybe the concept of a semantic layer. That in engineering terms is something that we're all familiar with. We understand as data leaders, but as a business person, what does that even mean to me? And so here, an example that I would use is I could upload a bunch of documents about our semantic layer, the way that we've structured it, our naming conventions, our way of joining tables together, and drop it all into this and say, hey, please give me a concept explainer that would explain this in business terms that would relate to how they can leverage it to drive their decisions. And so this concept explainer would go a long way. Today, we're going to create our own document, just again as an example to show how fast it is. Choose our language, English, and then I'm going to copy and paste into this that I want to create an FAQ about our company. Again, all I've given is a context document so far, as you've seen many times. And now it's going to create this report. So as we get in after about a minute, it creates this report called an FAQ. And as we scroll down, you can see that it's already given us like, what type of products do we offer? What is our signature line? It's giving us information about what makes our products different. Again, very quickly, the goal is not that this is a perfect end product, but it's done something with the document that we provided that would have taken us hours, right? And it would have meant that we had to go through and understand this. This at least now gives me the foundation where I can then use this to enhance it, change the questions, modify it, but I've given it at least the majority of the work is already done for me. And so that's where, when you think about sidekick, it's really about how does it speed you up, whether that's creating documents, whether that's creating some of the work that you need to be done, whether that's helping you understand different things, it's kind of there. And now what I'll do is I'll shift to the second part, which is AI as a sparring partner. We've talked a lot about, hey, data is a lonely space to be in. And so AI helps me accelerate, not just accelerate my analysis, but it helps me stay in the driver's seat. It helps me stay in control of what's happening around. I don't have the knowledge that my team often does on topics. I am not an expert in many of the things that we deal with on a daily basis. And so AI helps me draft fast. It helps me get to summaries quickly, scenarios quickly. It helps me think about a problem very quickly. It also allows me to validate. So whilst I get this insight from it, I'm able to validate it and understand it and cross-reference to my experience. That's where the sparring partner comes in. It helps me frame decisions. So obviously, a lot of times there's an output, but how do I translate that into impact? How do I translate that into action? How do I create that confidence within the business? That's where I can spar with it to really help me understand that. And obviously, then I have to stay in control of it. It is meant to be just my junior analyst, my executive assistant. I still need to be the decision maker. And when I'm a decision maker, I also need to have somebody to spar with so that I can understand what are the trade-offs. And we'll go through those in a few minutes. And so I use this accelerated analysis loop. Historically, I would have to read a lot of documents. I would have to think about them. I'd have to kind of figure out, okay, do I set up a brainstorming session to go through that with somebody? Do I bring in an analyst or somebody in the business to spar with that may not have the context that I do, that may not understand it the way that I do, that may not be an expert in that field. And so now I'm able to quickly draft with AI, validate what the information that I'm getting, frame, refine, add context, add questions, add elements like that, and then ultimately translate that into decisions. But the important part here is don't skip the validation. It's easy that you can skip right through and say, I trust it. But in reality, what will happen is that it'll make a mistake. It won't understand the full context. It'll give you something that in reality isn't truly possible. And then you'll look quite sloppy doing that. And that's the goal we want to avoid. Our goal is to accelerate, not to kill the credibility that we've built in that business. And so today there's kind of three prompts that we can start to think about. Prompt one is around strategy. Prompt two is around understanding a topic. And we'll go through those two examples in a minute so I can show you how I leverage them. And prompt three is really about people and feedback. The big thing that I always talk about here is you need to give AI a role, a task, and a clear context. And so if you look at prompt one, act as my CFO. I needed to act as a CFO. You can say here, act as a CFO of a 3-year startup with 100 employees that is going through Series C funding, giving it really good context, but you're still asking it to act as a CFO. And that would be a different response than act as a CFO of a multinational with 30 years of experience. And I think that's the part is that you can help kind of give it that context. Obviously, your context document helps there too, especially if you're asking it to act as your CFO. But here we're asking it to act as a CFO. We're then telling it that we want to do this task and you must do this for me. And the second one, we're asking it to act as a marketing measurement expert. Again, we're giving it a task, explain the differences, help me understand the assumptions, and the context is there as well. I want to predict 3 pushback questions I'll be getting in a boardroom setting. In prompt three, act as an executive coach. I want to give feedback to a team member who's flagging problems without proposing solutions. Give me 3 feedback scripts. Again, these are all situations that we don't know how they're going to go when we go into these meetings or these sessions, but I can now use AI as my sparring partner to prepare in advance. I can get those situations. I can think about my angle of how I might want to approach that. And this is where AI really helps. So let's go through the prompt, the first one. So here, again, similar one context file, very little information give it. So obviously, the more that you give it, the faster that accelerated curve will come. Act as my CFO. I'm recommending we cut onboarding steps from 5 to 3. You must list the top 5 financial, operational, or risk-based objections that he would raise or she would raise and suggest what data I'll need to defend this recommendation. Right? So right away, copy paste, get into it, and it'll come up fairly quickly with an answer. In this case here, it's using CFO Daniel, who are made up CFO from our cat food company, the example that we've used. And it knows that Daniel is rigorous, he's data first, and he likes to do trade-offs front and center. Right. So right away, AI as my sparring partner understands my CFO and would automatically tailor those recommendations or those things of like the objections that would get raised accordingly. And so right away in this situations, without giving any context, it said, okay, well, Daniel might be afraid of losing customers, right? If we short the onboarding process, it might reduce the depth of education. And so, hey, here's the data you might need to defend yourself. And it goes through and gives me 5 different things. Again, all of these 5 may never get raised by Daniel, but I'm ready for them if they are. I can now spend a few minutes going through each of them saying, okay, let's dig deeper into 3, help me understand what exactly the objection might be. Let's talk about the data. How would I get this data? What would I do? Especially if I've already connected to my warehouse, what table might that live in? It really helps me spar to get ready to either answer those questions and prepare it. And obviously, at the end, it will always recommend something if you want to do it, but that's for you to control as you wish. And so here in this case, that's where it helps. If I then go into part 2, I now want it to teach me something. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I am not potentially an expert on marketing measurement, and I want to be able to say, hey, teach me this so that I can come across as educated, either talking to my team or at least I can understand what it might be. Or I might be an expert, but I don't know how to actually explain this to a non-technical executive team. And so here, let's spar, let's discuss. And so right away, we'll ask that prompt. Obviously, as you saw earlier, it's explained to me what it is, what are some of the assumptions, some of these strengths. It's given me all of these differences between MTA, MMM, et cetera, and some of the pushback questions that I could get in the boardroom. Again, very useful for me. And then here now I'm asking it to say, okay, great. You've given me a very high level understanding, but I need to help me understand MTA better. Can you teach it to me? And so now it will become a teacher in the way that it will explain to me the basics, some of the drivers, and the assumptions behind it. What's really great about this is, as a brand new person, I may never have known about the fact is that, multi-touch attribution, many companies rely on first touch, last touch. And so here I'm now able to understand a little bit faster than I would by going to Google or even just asking somebody. And oftentimes, as we know, as leaders, we want to protect our egos. I can now have somebody that can work with me in this space. I could also act as a teacher, act as a marketing expert, help me understand. And so there's ways to go. Obviously, I can dig deeper into any of these topics as we go along. All of that information is quite there. Here in this case here, I'm now asking it to say, hey, my company is Last Click. How could I get them to use MTA? Again, sparring with the AI to say, help me draft this. And it's helping me again to draft the solution, the benefits, how to introduce it with a step-by-step basis. So as you've seen from all these examples so far, it is very much about helping me frame my thinking, helping me spar with myself, helping me ask questions without, dumb questions that might be dumb to me, to get the answers that I want. All of this comes with a disclaimer, though. So it's there to sharpen your thinking, but let's never forget that it doesn't know your data. It doesn't know your politics. It definitely doesn't know your history. It knows your stakeholders based on the information you've given it. It only knows what you've told it. And so AI will always come across as sounding confident, even if it's wrong. And it may have an opinion about multi-touch attribution that may not be fully grounded in truth. And so just because it's confident doesn't necessarily mean that it's always true. So I do validate my outputs, right? Once you've learned those things, you can go and check obviously on the internet or read some books or see other things to see if it aligns with what it's thinking to cross-reference it. You should always be triangulating all the information across many sources. It is designed to agree with you. So obviously, the more you kind of tell it what you want, the more it's going to give you what you want. And so especially in the sparring partner component, make sure that you tell it that you want it to be critical thinking with you. I think we've all been there where we said, this is wrong. And it goes, you're right. I am wrong. And let me give you the right answer. And so I think you also bring a criticality to your thinking as well there. As I mentioned earlier, it doesn't know your messy warehouse. It doesn't know your flawed tracking. It doesn't have that context unless you give it to it. So depending on if your environment is contained or not, you can obviously provide more information, but you understand that. So always make sure that, you're in the driver's seat when it comes to how do you want to use it, and don't just assume that whatever it tells you is fact. And then finally, the goal isn't to outsource your thinking. I mean, if you start to depend on it for thinking in the future, you'll start to struggle, especially in the moment when you're having those conversations. The goal is just to pressure test ideas, is to give you more context, is to help you think in advance of what might come up, and so that you can walk into those meetings, those conversations sharper. And so I always add that disclaimer, especially when it comes to that component. So far we've done AI as a sidekick, helping us get faster, helping us draft things, helping us build things. We've gone to AI as a sparring partner, helping us kind of frame our messaging, think about the way that we want to approach it, really kind of going back and forth on some of these ideas and acting as something. And now what we're going to talk about is AI as my copywriter. And so copywriting is, I think, one of the things that it's quite good at with some frameworks in place. So nowadays, it's very easy for us to look at and get a result. And as data leaders, we've historically understand the numbers quite well. We have always turned them into things that are data first. We understand that, hey, churn is at 28%. That's not good. Benchmark is 35 or whatever it happens to be. But we now can use AI to help us translate that into business terms. Right. And that's the piece that I use it a lot for. I like to take a result, I like to take a number, I like to take an analysis, and I want to say, okay, how do I frame this in a way that the business will understand? How can you write this in a way that translates my objective, my goal, my piece down, my decision down into something that's actionable for someone else that may not be and will not be as familiar with the data as I am. So it adds that context, it adds the risks. It might recommend a clearer action plan than I would in my own wording. So oftentimes I will write what I want and then ask it to rewrite for me in the context that I give it. And so we'll see that here in an example. One of the things that I wanted to do and to help me is that I want that same message to be written for different people. So right now I lead over 20 people in my team. With the company, I have over 15 different stakeholders that I work with on a daily basis. They are all different people. Some people are quite analytical. Some people are quite contextual. Some people like ambiguity. Some people don't. Some people have ties to everything must be tied to revenue. Others have customer feelings in their mind. And so I need to tailor that same message. At the end of the day, the churn rate is decreasing by 5%. And I need to tailor that message to my different audiences so that I can make sure that they understand in the context that benefits them. And so historically, I would have written that for each of them. Hey, person X, blah, 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 blah. Hey, person Y, here's the same message, but now I just spent 30 minutes rewriting it. And as we all know, we often wordsmith our way through it. And so here in this example here, we're going back to our first at the start. Remember when we asked it to look at our analysis, and at the end it said, okay, let me write one short bullet style for Sarah. So here we're saying, yes, please. I do want to write to Sarah, our CEO, with the information that I found in my analysis. And so here it already knows, as I've given it the context, that Sarah is someone who is short, structured, and loves bullet points, wants to tie it back to customer impact. That's her focus as our CEO. That is what she wants to see. And now it writes it in a way that is quick and to the point that she might see. Why, what we're seeing, why, what's the customer impact? Her big focus point, right? Maybe for her, it's customer impact. Maybe for somebody else, it's retention. Maybe for somebody else, it's revenue. What's our opportunity? Because as data leaders, we're tying it back up to that opportunity. And then what are some of the next steps that we propose? And the value here is as we've used our AI as a sidekick and a sparring partner, and as a copywriter, we're now saying, hey, help me translate this into business impact. Because there's nothing worse than coming in and saying, oh, from a data perspective, A, B, C is happening. I don't have any recommendations for the business. I just think it's a problem and we should look into it. That doesn't make you a thought partner with the business. And so my AI as a copywriter helps me then translate that into next steps that might help. So in this case here, we've seen a downward trend in sales. This is the impact to customers. Here's what I recommend. We should look at to highlight our lower cost SKUs. It'll balance the mix. Okay, great. That's a great recommendation from the business. And I can even take it a step further if I give it more context and more information around what does that mean? If we can increase it by 1%, that's going to increase our customer NPS by 5 points, or we estimate it'll increase by 5 points. Now, you saw the message that I'm writing to the CEO. Obviously, I wouldn't copy and paste this into an email and send it directly. I would pad this or even maybe add a little bit more of my context, my experience, my wording in a certain way. But now I say, okay, take this exact same message and write it to my team. And so you can see here in the bottom, I'm writing my prompt very badly. But now help me share the same message to my team. In this case here, I haven't told it what my team is, but if I said it's a data team, they're very detail orientated. Now it's writing here me a Slack message that I can then write to the team. It's much more padded, much more detailed. It still uses bullet points because that's the way it likes to write. And I can obviously change that into paragraph form if I would like to, but it's already taken the same message and wrote a much more detailed view for us with some, thank you for your work and energy. So it's added some context to it or some information to it. Now, from here, I can then train it to think the way that I want. So great, and it saved us a bunch of time. So historically, as I've mentioned, that would have taken me maybe 10 or 15 minutes to write a secondary message. Now I can use that 10 or 15 minutes to wordsmith it, add to it, modify it, or just save myself some time, and I can do this in 2 or 3 minutes really quickly. One of the things that I also do is once I've now cleaned up the message and written it the way that I want to, I then use that to retrain it so that I give it back to it so that it now understands my context. And so a couple notes on AI as your copywriter. We've looked at 2 examples, right? We've written a message for Sarah, CEO, in a certain way. It writes fast, but it's not always right. It does miss nuance, it does miss tone, it doesn't necessarily understand the tension in the topic or the room. And so that's the value that you add to that message. So obviously make sure that you take whatever it provides to you and frame it in a way that'll land for your audience. It doesn't know your audience. What sounds inspiring to one team actually might not work for another. And so you need to really make it understand, well, how does your team like to communicate? And so, like I mentioned earlier, I always feed back my final message back to it and say, hey, this is my final message that I wrote. Please remember this for future context. Tone is everything. AI does have a way of writing in a robotic. It is somewhat sometimes passive aggressive depending on the message. It can be out of touch. And so, especially those EM dashes that we're all now familiar with as being AI written. So make sure that you change the tone, make sure that it aligns to the way that you want to write it. Make sure that you remove those M dashes so that people don't think that it's AI, because that can very much blow your credibility, even if the message resonates. People are scanning it very quickly and saying, this is AI. He didn't even spend 10 minutes to think about this properly. He just outsourced it to AI, right? So we want to make sure that our copywriter isn't going to blow our cover. Your voice also builds that trust. So shape that message to sound like you. You have a specific way of writing that AI does not know until you teach it. And so make sure to use your voice in the messaging. I have a personality. I want that personality to come through and shine in the way that I write. And so the more that you educate it, the more you go. And so just keep these things in mind as you have AI write as your copywriter. And so now we've talked about AI as a sidekick, sparring partner, copywriter, and we're like really trusting it to do a lot of the stuff for us. But in order to make that happen, I'm a big believer that we need to have guardrails. And so guardrails matter because you open yourself up to risk if you don't. And guardrails is not necessarily something that I input into my ChatGPT. You can, obviously, but what I like to do is to say, these are just kind of things that I live by or things that I share when I use AI. And so obviously we talked about validation. I validate every number ahead of time. I don't just trust that my 12% reduction in churn is 12%. Yes, it probably is right. And most of the time it is, but sometimes there's some hallucinations. And so I validate that in a slightly different way. Second thing is I always make sure that it has a human voice. I really wanted to make sure that I validate to make sure that it has my voice, that it does create the recognition, that it is speaking in the way that I would like to speak. I also make sure that we're having safe uses. Depending on your instance, it could be that if you're using cloud or public version, I want to make sure that sensitive data doesn't come out, that we're not putting information on the internet. Even just in my context file, for example, I am putting personal information in there. I talked about Sarah, our CEO. I talked about Daniel, our CFO. What do they like? Who are they? That is information that if it did go public, that may be embarrassing to them, may be embarrassing to me. And so I make sure to keep that sensitive data under some clear rules about what I share and don't share. It's even better if it's in a container environment. And recently, obviously, ChatGPT started to come out in the news a little bit about having your searches or your ChatGPT chats publicly available in search. And so make sure to disable that functionality, make sure to protect the work that you're doing to keep it in your container. My guardrails, I also make sure that I have a consistent quality in what I'm writing. ChatGPT will have waves of good and bad, and you have to keep it honest. But I make sure that I don't just copy and paste things over. I make sure to review them, ensure my standard, and I make sure that my team also understands that there is a standard to the way that we do it. We have a color guide, we have a format standard, we have a way of writing standard, right? So again, these are all things that we've implemented, but it needs to meet those standards. And then finally, the big one too, and this is maybe not so much of a guardrail, but by modeling that responsible use as a leader, you normalize that safe experimentation with your team. And so for us, we're really encouraging the use of AI. It's at different stages of our journey, but we really want to make sure that we're using it in a safe way. And so my five guardrails, just to recap, I always validate numbers. We always validate numbers. We use it for speed, not substitution. So it gives me a head start. It helps me think faster. But the final tone, the story, the judgment comes from me, and I'm the owner of that. So we don't accept things like, oh, my bad, ChatGPT gave me wrong information. That's kind of like saying, oh, the internet gave me wrong information. Yeah, that's sometimes the case, but we now know that we need to validate it. It's just there to give me a head start. I'm trusting myself as a leader to come up with a judgment. We save what works. So a lot of prompts work, a lot of them don't work. The ones that do work, we do save, we share. We iterate context documents, when we work together, depending on the team, but leadership team, we do share where we can, so that everyone can use the same information, right? So it's not just I have my contacts document, my direct reports have their contacts documents. We can share similar ones, especially when it comes to individuals. We never paste sensitive data into it. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we don't know where it goes, so we keep it unless it's contained. And if you have a container, that's fantastic. That allows you to paste more of that information or use more of that information. And then finally, we're open about it. It's not cheating. I think using AI has this taboo that, oh, you're cheating, or oh my God, you're not doing your job. But in reality, It's a thought partner. We never thought that Googling was cheating in the past. We said that Google is a great asset for us. This is also a similar thing. This is just allowing us to get to answers faster or to have quicker results in terms of what we want and to interact with it instead of just, oh, you went to the wrong search page. And so I think we're really trying to be more open about it, that it's not a taboo topic. And so let's put all this together. I've talked a lot today about a lot of different things. And so, first, remember, use AI as a sidekick. For me, set up those project folders, upload those files, those briefs, those schemas, that context file. Make AI your analyst, your executive assistant. The second one is AI as a sparring partner. Use those act as statements. They are incredibly powerful in the way that you can pressure testing. Act as a 20-year veteran in the industry of X. Help me do this. Draft the trade-offs for me. Be my sparring partner. Basically give yourself an executive coach in the room with you. AI as a copywriter, help me rewrite, help me frame the analysis, help me role play, help me frame this in a business terminology. Really use it to write the things in a different way that you may not have had that experience in the past, or to help sharpen your message. And then finally, what we just talked about is follow your daily habits of guardrails. Make sure you validate those numbers, protect your data, use AI as drafts, not decisions. Be open about it, and then really save what works and share it across your company because this is an accelerator. We are investing in our AI here as we add more context. And so you'll see an exponential growth the more that you invest. And not everybody needs to go through that same learning journey for their AI. You can actually help the organization enhance it. And so if you know me, I'm big on challenges. I'm big on making these things actionable. What I want you to do this week is a bit of a challenge. And so I'm challenging you to take one habit from each of the quadrants that we talked about today and implement it. So make it your copilot or sidekick. I want you to set up one project folder and upload a couple files. If you're using the public free version, you can only upload one file a day, but go that way. If you're paying for it, you can upload as many files as you want, but really set it up, start testing it because again, we're investing in our AI ecosystem and it takes that time to start doing that now and you'll see the rewards later. Use an act as statement this week. I want you to use it as a prompt, maybe pressure test something before your next meeting. I'm going into this meeting. Help me think about how I can handle this decision. How can I influence my CFO? How can I influence my team? Use that act as statement to help you there. Use AI this week to maybe take one analysis, one slide deck, maybe one decision that needs to be made, and rewrite the messaging. And so think of it as to try it out for communication. Maybe, hey, write a Slack message saying, great job to my team this week for their efforts and see what it gives you. Yeah, you can write that, but you'll see that it's a little bit faster than you writing it. And then finally, start thinking about your own guardrails. Write your own 3 or 4 line personal AI guardrail statement and share it with peers or your team. The more that you're thinking about the guardrails about how you want to use AI, how your team wants to use AI as a leader, then you'll take that next step. Really open up that AI is acceptable within the organization. And so that's your challenge for this week. I thank you very much for coming today, obviously, but part of this is the kickstart to the cohort course that I am launching on October 21st. And so what you saw today is a small tidbit of the things that we were going to cover during that course, which is from data manager to AI ready leader. I want to help you as a manager or as an individual take that next step in your leadership journey. And so our 4-day cohort course is 4 live sessions. They're 2 hours each. On the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, we will dive in deeper into topics like how do I how do I know my stakeholders? How do I drive alignment within the organization? How can I make sure that I am getting the buy-in that I need? On the 22nd, we're going to focus on AI. How do I create business use cases? How do I convince the business to invest in AI when we all know that AI requires data governance behind it? How do I frame these use cases in a way that shows me as a progressive leader for the organization and not just the data person over here in the corner? And on the 23rd, we dig deeper into building our operating system. So for me, a large part of what we talk about today, but in general, even more so, is how do we build a system that allows us to free up that capacity to take that next step from managing to leading? And that involves process, it involves structure, it involves ways of thinking so that your team gets that clarity, that you have that way of working that enables you to free up that time to become that leader that's thinking about the future, that's driving change, that's aligning across the business. And so this cohort course is really big on that. On the 28th, we'll get back together and we'll discuss the changes that you've made in the last week. We'll answer many of the questions you might have once you've started to put this into practice. The beautiful thing about this cohort course is that I expect to have over 20 of you join. And when you join, that network of people that you'll work with in that 2 week window become your peers and friends in the industry that you can then connect with at any point in time so that you can continue on your journey together as well. And so here, if you scan this QR code, you'll get a Lead 20 discount. So because you've come to the Lightning Talk today, I'm offering all of you a 20% discount on an already pretty low price. Our first cohort is going to be cheaper because we do want to drive as many people as possible to do this course at the start. So I can learn from you, I can get some feedback on it, I can really iterate it in the future, and we will be increasing the price for future cohorts. So with that in mind, we've covered a lot today. I do want to thank you all for coming. Please reach out if there's any questions that you might have on the things that we covered today. Uh, Otherwise, I wish you all a great day and thank you again. Have a good day. Bye.